The instant Christine Brown entered the courtroom, it was as if the air itself had changed. With each step she took, it sounded as though the very sound was reverberating against the polished wooden floors. And her soft heels clicking sounded like the sound of a ticking clock, counting down to an epiphany no one was prepared for. Hearts pounded, breath held in the throat, and every gaze was drawn to her, fixed on every movement she made. Others leaned forward, hardly daring to blink, in case even the passage of 1 second hid the truth from their sight. Others whispered behind cupped hands, shaking with tension, but before they could say what they had to say, it was sucked down by the heavy silence of anticipation. No one dared to speak loudly enough to shatter the tension. The room itself seemed to be holding its breath, anticipating what was to come. The air was perfumed ever so faintly with wood polish, old leather, and anxious perfume, but such familiar aromas were overwhelmed by the weight of terror and wonder, weighing down upon the spirit of every single person there. Seated at the defendant's table was Kody Brown, tense, white, and shaking. He held the table's edge so hard his knuckles were white, his hands shaking uncontrollably. His normally erect stance was lost, replaced by the characteristic unease of a man cornered, uncertain if he would weather the tempest brewing to hit. His glance shifted to the gallery, where his relatives sat, then to Christine, whose quiet, deliberate strides seemed almost feral in the electric silence. Behind him, the other wives, Meri, Janelle, and Robyn, sat like statues, their emotions carefully masked but impossible to conceal entirely. Mary's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles pressing into her palms, as though she were bracing herself for a blow she knew was coming. Her eyes, usually soft and gentle, flickered with a mixture of anger and fear, betraying the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. Janelle's lips were clenched into a tight line, her jaw clenched, and her eyes flashing between Kody and Christine, full of accusation, confusion, and heartbreak. Robyn, way at the other end, attempted to conceal shaking hands under her coat, but deep, controlled breaths gave away the anxiety bubbling just beneath. All three wives, in their respective ways, were teetering on the brink of collapse, aware that today might alter everything they believed they knew about their family. The courtroom itself appeared nearly sentient, as though it could feel the enormity of what was about to happen. Sunlight poured in through the high windows, casting long, cutting shadows across the waxed floor. The heavy wooden benches, normally cold and lifeless, now appeared to vibrate with anticipation, trembling with the burden of the many secrets contained within the walls. The subtle smell of paper, ink, and wood polish was blended with the metallic taste of fear, a pungent atmosphere heavy with tension. Even the gallery spectators appeared glued to their seats, forward-leaning with breath held, unable to turn away. Each whispered word, each rustle of documents, each groan of a chair heightened the tension. The judge came into the room with a deliberate, commanding presence, the flowing robe rustling softly as he moved to the bench. Older, wiser, and more serene, he was still not immune to the faint tightening around the eyes, the minute furrow on the forehead. There was something in this trial that was imbued with a significance that extended far beyond regular proceedings. As he brought the gavel up, the room contracted into itself with expectation, the walls constricting with the burden of hopes, fears, and unspoken questions. The gavel came crashing down, calling for order, but even that forceful sound could not break through the tension altogether. A hum of amazement and incredulity swept the courtroom in a wave of electricity. Everyone knew something momentous was going to take place. This was no common trial. This was the day that years of secrets, deceptions, and buried truths were going to be laid bare, and the repercussions would ripple in the Brown family like a tidal wave. Kody shifted in his chair, the smooth wood digging into his spine, but it provided little comfort. His gaze darted frantically over to Christine once more. She was serene, unnervingly so, her face serene, almost distant, as if she had practiced this scene 1,000 times in her head. Her serenity only served to heighten the fear inside Kody's chest. He was trapped in a tempest he could not control, and it struck him with the force of a blow to the belly. No matter what came next, nothing would ever be the same again. Christine hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the courtroom. She glanced at the audience, the attorneys, the judge, but then she rested at last on the Brown family. For an instant, time itself seemed to slacken. Every second lingered, slow and weighed down, full of potential revelation. Her lips curled up ever so slightly, a weak, barely perceptible smile that made every person in the room shiver down their spines. There was strength there, a still, awful strength that only one who was completely in command could master. The gallery families squirmed uncomfortably. Others attempted to conceal their expectation behind impassive faces, but their hands gave them away, tightly bunched around notebooks, grasping at seat edges, fidgeting with anxious fingers. The court reporter's hand hesitated in mid-air, an ink stroke suspended, as if she intuited that the tale being spun was not merely text on paper, but history taking shape. Cameras within the courtroom whirred and snapped, immobilizing the tension, the terror, the unspoken theater hovering like a dense mist in the air. Meri, Janelle, and Robyn looked at each other with glances that were half accusatory and half questioning. Their unspoken understanding said it all. What is she going to say? What does she know? And how will it all change? All three of them grappled with their own suspicions and fears. What was left unsaid was obvious. Today would either break the family apart forever, or expose something they didn't want to know. The room became still once more. Eerily quiet. Each heartbeat, each little noise seemed magnified in the silence. Even the tick of a clock somewhere else sounded like a sinister countdown. Amidst the silence, Christine moved one slow, measured step forward. The courtroom leaned in as one, transfixed by the weight of her presence. No one stirred, no one breathed too hard. Each one of them, from Kody seated at the defendant's table to the judge at the bench, understood that this was the first second of a tale that would make them wish for the rest of their lives that it never happened. The tension was oppressive. The walls suspended their breath. The waxed floor mirrored the worried faces like a mirror of collective fear. The stage was set, the actors in position, and the initial word from Christine would unleash a chain of revelations, betrayals, and heartbreaks. It was the day secrets would burst in the open, revealing truths that had been hidden for years. The courtroom, the Brown family, and all who watched were on the brink of a cliff, looking into a storm that held nothing but chaos, suspense, and unforgettable drama. And then, in a careful, deliberate eye on Kody, Christine spoke her first word at last. The voice of the prosecutor resonated through the courtroom. "We call Christine Brown to the stand." A silence fell at once, heavier than the last, as if the walls themselves were holding breath. Christine stood up slowly, her movements slow, each step measured and controlled. The soft click of her heels on the polished floor sounded louder than ever, echoing through the room like the sound of a bell ringing out something irrevocable. Every face turned to see, the tension almost impossible to bear. She walked towards the witness stand with a tranquility that sent the room trembling. There was no doubt in her eyes, no uncertainty. It was as if she had practiced this moment for years, and was now armed with the authority to destroy everything with a single word. Kody's eyes watched her every step, wide-eyed, pale, almost frozen with terror. He could sense the burden of what was about to happen, yet he did not know how to prevent it. Christine sat, slowly crossing her legs, and glared at the judge with an unblinking gaze. The courtroom drew in upon her, each onlooker leaning forward, attempting to detect the slightest twitch, the slightest movement that would indicate what was to come. The judge cleared his throat, shattering the silence. "Do you swear to tell the truth? The whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Christine replied in a low, steady, and chillingly serene voice. The words came out with such accuracy that the courtroom leaned in closer, as if the strings were invisible. The prosecutor unfolded a series of documents from his folder very carefully. "Christine, can you share with the court what you do know about the circumstances surrounding the incident?" Christine took a slow, deep breath, as if savoring the tension. She began her story, carefully choosing every word. "I've kept silent for too long," she said, her eyes scanning the courtroom like a hawk. "I've watched secrets destroy people, manipulate families, and hide the truth behind lies. Today, it all comes out. Each word she uttered had the sense of something falling into the room. Minute things nobody had ever envisioned before began to come up. Secret debates, midnight altercations, threatened whispers. Her words created an image of a family in disarray, fissures going deeper than anybody outside the walls could possibly comprehend. Kody shifted restlessly. Sweat beads formed on his forehead. His fingers drummed against the table edge. Each declaration by Christine was a personal affront, a confrontation of his failure and secretive behavior. The wives were also engaged in an unspoken conflict of emotions. Fear, wrath, and disbelief marked on their faces. They had believed they were aware of the truth, but with each word, the earth seemed to shift beneath them. Christine's pause for dramatic effect allowed her words to sink in. The resultant deafening silence was pregnant with tension. Every single eye in the courtroom was on her. Every single mind was wondering. Was she telling the complete truth? Was there more than meets the eye? And most crucially, how far was she prepared to go? She slumped slightly forward, her eyes fixed on Kody. There are things about this family, about what really did happen, that no one has ever witnessed, she declared, her voice dropping to a cold whisper that inexplicably carried across the room. Today, they will all witness it. Today, the truth is revealed. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Cameras zoomed in, attempting to get the tension on tape. Lawyers murmured and made furious scribbles with their pens, aware that the tale about to be told was greater than anything they could have imagined. Even the judge, battle-hardened and unruffled, had a slight furrow of the brow, as he understood the enormity of what Christine was to discover. Next came the initial stunning clue, something subtle, but earth-shaking. Christine's eyes flashed with a nearly deadly ferocity, as she declared, "Some of you will be surprised. Some of you might even feel betrayed. But the truth doesn't lie." Kody gulped hard. His guts knotted up. He attempted to turn away, but Christine's stare was powerful, unrelenting, drawing him in and holding him spellbound. It was no longer about testifying. It was an exercise of power, and Christine had it all under her control. She began to unveil the initial fragments of evidence, minute but indisputable information, that indicated greater treachery, decisions made in secret, and hidden truths for years. With each disclosure, the space changed. Whispers swirled through the gallery, yet no one was brave enough to voice anything loud. Gasps, held breaths, and staring eyes dotted the silence. The anticipation was so palpable it was practically alive, a creature constricting around everyone's throats. Christine hesitated once more, allowing the impact of her words to sink in. "This family," she said softly, almost in awe, "has been keeping secrets that can destroy everything. And today, you will know." At that point in time, the courtroom was not a room, it was a stage, and Christine was the figure of a drama so charged that everyone was at the brink. Nobody knew what she would do next, and that uncertainty, the unknown in every silence, made the tension agonizing. The prosecutor leaned forward, working carefully through questions, but it was obvious that Christine was driving the show. Each response, each look, each sly smile, was chosen to keep the courtroom in suspense. She wasn't testifying, she was conducting a dramatic reveal, and no one from Kody and the other wives to the judges and the prosecutor was immune to her showmanship. By the time she finished the first part of her testimony, the room was irrevocably changed. Kody looked shattered, pale as a ghost. Meri's hand shook slightly as she gripped her notebook. Janelle's eyes were wide, filled with disbelief. Robyn's chest rose and fell rapidly, as she tried to contain her anxiety. Even the audience in the gallery was leaning forward, silent and tense, captivated by every word Christine had spoken. Everyone knew it was only the tip of the iceberg. Christine had foreseen, baited the truth, and now the courtroom was in suspense, hanging in anticipation for the moment when all would be out. The courtroom was tense, all eyes were on Christine, and tension so thick that it was almost choking filled the air. Kody fidgeted in his chair, looking down as if wishing the room to swallow him up. The other wives, Meri, Janelle, and Robyn, remained motionless, each wondering what Christine had just said. Each disclosure up until this point had been deliberately weighed, each one unlocking ancient secrets. And now, there was a charged feeling in the air, a storm about to erupt. Christine tilted forward ever so slightly on the witness stand, her tone firm but packed with a nearly perilous fervor. You see, she started. What many fail to realize is that things are not as they appear. Families are not always as they appear. Words, actions, and decisions are concealed, carefully concealed, until someone at last dares to bring them to light. She stopped, building suspense. There was a hint of a smile on the corner of her mouth, not evil, but calculated. The weight of every word fell heavily on everyone in the court. Kody's fists were tightly clenched together in front of him, his knuckles white. His heart pounded faster as he understood the enormity of what was taking place. Then Christine started dropping the initial bits of the actual bombshells. Tiny details, once utterly irrelevant, began to paint a picture, much more sinister than anyone in the courtroom could have possibly conceived. Private late-night chats, messages never intended to be discovered, tiny manipulations. They were all unveiled bit by bit. Each bit was like a puzzle piece, building gradually a scary picture of betrayal, secrecy, and deception. The wives exchanged glances, their emotions spiraling. Meri's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Janelle's jaw tightened in disbelief, and Robyn's hands fidgeted nervously in her lap. It was as if every word Christine spoke was twisting a knife deeper into the family's fragile foundation. The whispers and murmurs in the gallery grew louder, but still careful, controlled. They dared not interrupt the unraveling drama. Kody gulped hard. He had always been so convinced that he could shape the story, keep his family safe, and contain the crash of their secrets. But now Christine had taken the story altogether. Her serene, deliberate revelations were cutting through all the lies and illusions. For the first time, he felt helpless, vulnerable, and cornered. Christine's eyes passed over the courtroom once more, her eyes fixing for a moment on each of the wives. I know what you all think you know, she said slowly, purposefully. But the truth is something entirely different. And once it comes out, there's no turning back. The crowd leaning forward as one. All the cameras in the courtroom aimed at her. All the lawyers scribbled notes, frantic, desperate looking. Even the seasoned judge shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling the weight of what had just come out. There was a shared knowledge that the evidence had just gone into treacherous ground, laying bare the webs of lies, which would ruin the Brown family for all time. Then Christine shared the first direct connection involving Kody. The room literally hummed with tension. It wasn't mistakes, she stated, her tone low, deliberate, but intent-filled. Some things were intentional. Some decisions were made, thinking the hurt would come to the people we love. And some were done to guard secrets nobody else was supposed to know. Gasps echoed quietly through the gallery. Meri's eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and hurt flickering across her face. Janelle's lips parted slightly, as if she couldn't process the depth of what she was hearing. Robyn's hands gripped the edge of her seat, trembling, her breathing shallow. The tension in the room was palpable. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath in anticipation of the next revelation. Christine hesitated once more, allowing the silence to loom like a thick curtain over the courtroom. All eyes stayed fixed on her, all ears strained to hear her next utterance. The tension was agonizing. She had the control now, and she used it as a sword, slicing delicately through years of deception and pretension. You all believed in some things, assumed some truths, she went on, her tone gentle but unyielding. But trust can be tenuous, and sometimes, the people you trust most are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. Kody's face grew even whiter. His body language was that of desperation. He longed to speak, to protest, to explain, but words could not reverse what Christine had started. Every revelation another link in a chain tightening slowly around him. The courtroom itself was charged. You could practically see the tension arcing like lightning through the room. Cameras panned in on every little expression, shocked, scared, angry, or betrayed. Even the audience outside the immediate family got a chill. The sort of tension that makes your stomach lurch and your heart pound. Christine's last sentences in this section were ominous. I've waited long enough to tell the truth. The choices, the lies, the hidden actions, they all lead to a point no one expected. And once you see it, you'll understand why nothing can ever be the same. A quiet gasp was sent around the room. Kody's hands trembled ferociously now, and his head dropped low. The wives' eyes were wide, mouths slightly ajar, hearts pounding. The audience sensed the tension, the fear, the chaos to come. Everyone knew something historic was going to take place. It was obvious Christine had seized the initiative. The secrets were out, the tension impossible to bear, and the courtroom a pressure cooker ready to burst. It was palpable to everyone in the room. The unraveling was underway, and there was no going back. The courtroom breathed collectively as one. All eyes were fixed on Christine, who sat now with the air of a predator waiting to pounce. Kody's shaking hands clutched the tabletop. His knuckles whitened, as though any movement at all would shatter him beyond repair. The other wives, Meri, Janelle, and Robyn, sat motionless, their hearts pounding against their rib cages. Even the judge, seasoned and unflappable, leaned forward a fraction, his brow creased, knowing that something new was about to happen. Christine hesitated, allowing the silence to drag on. Each passing second was an eternity, a countdown to discovery. The courtroom was charged with anticipation, each observer mindful that what came next could make all the difference. Cameras in the courtroom zoomed in, recording every nuanced expression, every shudder of shock that could ripple through the Browns. And then Christine leaned forward, her gaze freezing Kody in place. With a cold glare, she spoke slowly, deliberately, each word measured, each word crushing. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady but weighted with the gravity of things to come. "There is one thing I have to confess, something I've kept secret for far too long." A murmur ran through the courtroom, barely contained. Kody's face paled further, his lips parting as if to protest, but no sound came out. Meri's hands clenched in her lap, Janelle's eyes widened in disbelief, and Robyn's chest heaved with shallow breaths. Even the gallery leaned in, drawn by the gravity of the moment. Christine's voice went lower, close to a whisper, but it cut through the room with killing distinctness. "I did it." The courtroom erupted into gasps, whispers, and shocked silence colliding like waves on a cliff. The judge banged the gavel over and over, calling for order, but the news had already spread like fire. Kody's hands trembled violently, his face paling to an eerie pale white. He slumped further into his chair, as if attempting to be swallowed up by the weight of the confession. The wives were frozen in disbelief. Meri's eyes filled with tears, Janelle's lips trembled, and Robyn's face was a mixture of shock and heartbreak. The confession was more than unexpected. It was earth-shattering. Every secret Christine had hinted at in the earlier sessions now had context, and the implications were terrifying. Christine went on, unflappable. "All that you've been told, all that you've believed, some of it was true, but some of it was carefully crafted to conceal what truly occurred. I made choices that I knew would alter everything, and today it all comes out." The room was silent again, but the tension was almost unbearable. Lawyers scribbled notes frantically, trying to piece together the implications. Cameras zoomed in on every reaction, capturing Kody's collapse, the wives' silent horror, and the stunned spectators struggling to comprehend the confession. Christine's eyes scanned the courtroom. "I did it to protect what I thought was necessary, but I realize now that the repercussions are much larger than I thought. Today the truth is finally known, and nothing will ever be the same." Kody shook. His brain went into overdrive trying to wrap its head around the truth of Christine's statements. All of his defensive reasoning, all of his attempts to rationalize away the evidence, disappeared in the face of her admission. The man who had felt he could dictate the terms was helpless now, vulnerable in front of the whole family and a witness-packed courtroom. The wives huddled together, their faces pale, their hearts pounding. Meri's voice broke as she whispered, barely audible, "How could this happen?" Janelle's jaw tightened as anger and disbelief warred within her. Robyn's hands shook,
as tears rolled down her cheeks, her body tense with shock and hurt. The crowd at the gallery shifted forward, frozen in a hair-raising silence that was so intense, it hurt. Each individual in the room sensed the scope of the moment. The confession was not just an assertion, it was a turning point that could reconfigure the whole Brown family. Even the judge, in an attempt to keep his cool, hesitated. His gavel hung suspended, a lifeline in the maelstrom, as he assimilated the magnitude of what had been said. Order in the court, he finally insisted, though his eyes gave away the astonishment he felt. But no measure of order could undo the damage of the confession. Christine had overturned the balance, uncovered concealed truths, and sent everyone into disarray. The tension hung in the air, as if time itself had stood still to allow the gravity of her words to settle fully. Christine relaxed back in her chair, her face impassive, almost calm. She had given her admission, dictated the terms, and departed the court, and the family shocked. The atmosphere had been so charged it was palpable, encircling each individual present. This was the moment that would become the trial. The moment when secrets were finally revealed. The moment when trust, betrayal, and heartbreak clashed in a courtroom that would never be the same. And as one final time, the gavel slammed down, calling out for silence and authority, all knew that the story was anything but finished. Christine had exposed the truth, but the aftermath, the repercussions, and the ultimate reckoning were only just beginning. The courtroom came undone. Attorneys yelled over each other, attempting to restore order, as reporters rushed to capture every astonishing detail. Cameras popped as the news of Christine's confession ran like fire through the room. Gasps rippled throughout the room, some suppressed, some open-mouthed, all harboring disbelief. The Brown family sat transfixed, each individual stuck in their own maelstrom of emotion. Kody sagged deeper into his chair, his hands shaking violently. He resembled a man denuded of control, naked for the entire world to view. Every choice, every secret he believed he had kept, now seemed to dissipate about him. The assurance he once bore into court had disappeared, replaced by a bare, raw vulnerability that left the entire courtroom gasping. Meri, Janelle, and Robyn battled to comprehend the shock. Meri cried silently, her hands white-knuckled as they clamped over her lap. Janelle's jaw stayed locked, anger and disbelief etched on her face. Robyn was panting, her fingers shaking as she attempted to steady herself. Their universe, painstakingly constructed over years of loyalty and honesty, had been destroyed in a single instant. The confession was more than words. Words were a detonator, exploding hidden secrets that had been festering in the dark. Christine, relaxing in her seat, was nearly impervious. Her face was tranquil, inscrutable. She had made the admission, used the truth as a missile, and now observed the consequences with the equanimity of one who had foreseen all responses. The tension within the room was palpable, weighing so heavily upon the shoulders of all present that it took effort to remain still. The judge raped his gavel, attempting to bring order, but the room was too electric, too alive with tension. Order, silence everyone, he thundered, his voice echoing. But the damage was done by Christine's words. The court itself seemed to hum with the tension of the revelation, every corner buzzing with whispers, gasps, and the scribble of desperate note-taking. Outside the courtroom, the tale had already caught fire. Spectators were murmuring to one another. Reporters were writing their headlines, and the world outside those walls was primed to see the Brown family implode in real time. The confession had created a domino effect that could not be halted. Each lie that was revealed, each secret that was exposed, would radiate far outside the courtroom. Within, the Brown family confronted the truth of the moment. Kody's body shook, his drawn face white as alabaster. The wives, seated yet, attempted to comfort each other silently, their mutual shock holding them together, even as the admission stood ready to disintegrate all they knew. They had been acquainted with tension, strife, and secret truths, but nothing could have readied them for such complete exposure. Christine's voice pierced the pandemonium again, steady and controlled. "The truth comes with a price," she murmured, nearly to herself, yet clearly audible to all. And today that price is being paid. Every secret, every hidden move, every decision, they all conclude here. The tension hung over the courtroom, like a storm cloud. Everyone in the courtroom knew it. The gravity of what had been said, and the expectation of what was to follow. No one could avert their eyes. No one could forget the naked power of the confession. The Brown family, once so artfully assembled, lay naked, exposed, and permanently altered. And as the gavel came down one last time, calling for silence and attention, the room gradually began to subside. But the tumult had already served its purpose. Christine had broken the story, seized the moment, and left each individual in that room, wondering about everything they believed they knew. The tension hung on, a shadow over the proceedings, because everybody knew the confession was only the beginning. It was the start of consequences, of reckonings, and of futures none of them could have imagined. The Browns would depart, that courtroom forever altered. The husbands, the wife, and even Christine herself, were swept up in a maelstrom of emotions: betrayal, anger, shock, and heartbreak. Outside the confines of justice, the world would observe, wonder, and wait for the next installment to come. But within, in this room suspended in time, one thing was definite: everything would never be the same. The admission had started a fire that could not be put out, and as the courtroom cleared, and only the sound of gasps, whispers, and the hammering gavel remained, the crowd, both within and without the courtroom, understood they had witnessed something remarkable, something suspenseful, shocking, and unforgettable, something that would be discussed, analyzed, and remembered for years to come.